Marcus was preparing for what he hoped would be his breakthrough. An exhibition at the Sterling Gallery, one of the most prestigious art venues in the city. The opportunity was a dream come true, and he poured his soul into every piece, spending long days and late nights at his studio. Serena, however, had grown restless. She often complained about his long hours, jokingly calling herself a studio widow. At first, Marcus brushed off her remarks, assuming she simply missed his company. He promised her that once the exhibition was over, they'd take a vacation together, just the two of them. "You've been saying that for years, Marcus," she had replied with a half-smile. He didn't think much of it at the time, but her words lingered in the back of his mind as he painted late into the night. One afternoon, as Marcus worked on a piece he hoped would be the centerpiece of his exhibition, his friend and fellow artist, Lyle, dropped by unannounced. Lyle was a photographer with a penchant for gossip, and while Marcus often found his chatter tiresome, he appreciated his loyalty. "You've been cooped up in here forever," Lyle said, plopping down on a stool. "When's the last time you went out?" Marcus chuckled, wiping paint from his hands. "Not until these are done. The exhibition's in 2 weeks. Lyle nodded, then hesitated. "You, heard from Serena today?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "No, why?" Lyle fidgeted with the strap of his camera back. "I saw something earlier. I wasn't sure if I should mention it, but you should probably know." Marcus set his brush down, his brow furrowing. "Know what?" Lyle pulled out his phone and hesitated before handing it over. "I was downtown earlier and saw her. She was with someone else. I didn't think it was a big deal, but they were getting into this really expensive car. It didn't feel right." Marcus stared at the screen, his stomach twisting as he took in the photo. It was Serena, unmistakably her, laughing as she climbed into a sleek black sports car. Beside her stood a man in a tailored suit, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. "Who is that?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "I don't know," Lyle admitted, "but they looked pretty comfortable together." Marcus felt a wave of nausea. Serena had always been outgoing and friendly, but this felt different. "You're sure it was today?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Lyle said. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to upset you, but I thought you should see it." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. "Thanks for telling me." That evening, Marcus returned home, his thoughts consumed by the image of Serena with the stranger. She greeted him warmly, as if nothing was amiss. "How was the studio?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Fine," Marcus replied, watching her closely. "What about you? How was your day?" She hesitated for the briefest moment, then smiled. "Uneventful. Just ran some errands." Marcus felt a flicker of doubt. Was it possible he was overreacting? Maybe the man in the photo was just a friend or a business associate. But the image of Serena laughing, so carefree and comfortable, wouldn't leave his mind. As they sat down for dinner, Marcus tried to push the thoughts aside. He needed to focus on his work, not let jealousy or suspicion cloud his mind. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that night, Marcus lay awake in bed while Serena slept beside him. He stared at the ceiling. The photo from Lyle burned into his memory. He didn't want to believe it. Serena had always been his rock, his support system. She wouldn't betray him, would she? And yet, the doubt gnawed at him. He resolved to find out the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. Marcus couldn't focus on his art the next day. The image of Serena in the stranger's car haunted him, a constant intrusion in his mind. Every brushstroke felt forced, every color choice hollow. He knew he had to confront her, but a part of him dreaded the answer. What if Lyle was right? What if Serena was hiding something? By evening, Marcus had barely made any progress on his paintings. Frustrated, he cleaned his brushes and headed home, determined to ask her about the photo. When he walked through the door, Serena was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. "You're home early," she said. "I couldn't concentrate," Marcus replied, his voice tight. Serena frowned. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, his pulse quickening. "I ran into Lyle yesterday. He showed me a photo of you." Her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. A photo? Of me? Marcus nodded. You were downtown, getting into a car with someone. A black sports car. Serena froze, her hand tightening around her phone. For a moment, she didn't respond, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. Oh, that, she said finally, her voice casual. That was just a business meeting. The guy owns a gallery, and I thought he might be able to help you. Her explanation sounded plausible, but something about her tone felt off. Marcus studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. Why didn't you tell me about it? He asked. I didn't think it was important, Serena said, shrugging. I know you've been stressed about the exhibition, and I didn't want to add to it. Her words seemed reasonable, but Marcus couldn't shake his unease. What's his name? David, she said quickly. David West. The name didn't ring any bells, but Marcus made a mental note to look it up later. He nodded, pretending to accept her explanation. Okay, thanks for telling me. Serena smiled, her shoulders relaxing. I'm just trying to help, Marcus. You know that, right? He nodded again, but as he headed to the bedroom to change, doubt lingered. That night, Marcus searched for David West online. He found several men with the same name, but none that seemed connected to the art world. Frustrated, he set his phone down and stared at the ceiling. One evening, while Serena was out, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. Thought you should see this. Attached was another photo. Serena and the same man from before, standing outside a high-end restaurant. She was laughing, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Marcus's stomach dropped. His fingers trembled as he stared at the image. Who is this? He texted back. The response came quickly. Ask your wife. Marcus's heart pounded. The betrayal he had feared was becoming harder to deny. He didn't know who had sent the photo, but their message was clear. Serena was hiding something. When Serena returned home later that night, Marcus was waiting for her. Where were you? He asked, his voice calm but firm. She looked surprised by the question. I told you, I was meeting Kelly for dinner. Marcus held up his phone, showing her the photo. Is this Kelly? Her face paled, and for a moment, she was speechless. Then she forced a laugh. Marcus, this is ridiculous. Who sent you that? I don't know, Marcus said, his voice rising, but they seem to know more about your life than I do. Serena crossed her arms, her tone defensive. So now you're spying on me? That's rich, coming from someone who spends more time with his paintings than his wife. Her deflection only fueled Marcus's anger. Don't turn this around on me, Serena. Just tell me the truth. Who is he? He's a friend, she said, her voice trembling. That's all. A friend you meet at expensive restaurants? A friend with a sports car? Serena's eyes filled with tears. I don't have to explain myself to you. Yes, you do. Marcus shouted. I've been working myself to the bone for this exhibition, for us, and you've been sneaking around behind my back. Her silence spoke volumes. Marcus felt his heart break. How long has this been going on? There's nothing going on, Serena insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't lie to me, Serena, Marcus said, his voice low and cold. Not anymore. Serena was uncharacteristically quiet the next few days, making no attempt to discuss the fight or explain herself further. The silence between them was deafening. Marcus spent his nights at the studio, unable to face her in the house they had shared. His anger simmered, but so did his curiosity. He needed to know the truth. One afternoon, while Serena was out, Marcus decided to search her belongings. He felt a pang of guilt as he rifled through her drawers, but his desperation outweighed his conscience. In her handbag, he found what he was looking for. A receipt from a luxury boutique, dated just 2 days prior. The amount was staggering, far beyond what their modest income could afford. Beside it was a business card, David Whitmore, executive consultant. Marcus stared at the name, his hands shaking. The pieces were starting to come together. That evening, as Marcus worked late in the studio, his phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. You're running out of time. Attached was a short video. Marcus's stomach churned as he pressed play. The clip showed Serena stepping out of the black sports car, smiling as David handed her a shopping bag. Marcus clenched his jaw, his fury building. Whoever was sending these messages wasn't just exposing Serena's betrayal, they were taunting him. He responded immediately. "Who are you? Why are you sending this to me?" No reply came. Marcus couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, he went to Serena. "I found the receipt," he said, holding it up. "And this." He dropped David's business card on the table. Her eyes widened, but she quickly masked her shock. "You went through my things?" "You don't get to play the victim," Marcus snapped. "What's going on, Serena? Who is David?" She hesitated, and Marcus could see the battle waging in her mind. Finally, she sighed. "He's a client. He's interested in your work." "Stop lying to me," Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I saw the video. I know you've been with him. How long has this been going on?" Tears filled her eyes, but Marcus didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "David offered to sponsor your exhibition. He said he could connect you with buyers, help you make a name for yourself. And what did you have to do in return?" Marcus asked coldly. Her silence was deafening. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You sold yourself for my career?" "It wasn't like that," Serena said, her voice breaking. "I was trying to help you, Marcus. You've been struggling for so long, and I thought—" "You thought what?" Marcus interrupted. "That I'd be okay with this? That I'd thank you for betraying me?" She reached for him, but he stepped back. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I just wanted to make things better." "You've destroyed everything," Marcus said, his voice hollow. That night, Marcus canceled the exhibition. He couldn't bear the thought of showcasing his work, knowing it was tainted by Serena's betrayal. He called the gallery director and fabricated a story about a personal emergency. "I'll reschedule when things settle down," he said, though he had no intention of doing so. As he hung up, he felt a strange sense of relief. The exhibition had been a source of stress for weeks, and now, without it looming over him, he could focus on what mattered most, rebuilding his life. Serena's betrayal had fractured their marriage, but Marcus wasn't content to simply walk away. He wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to experience the same pain and humiliation he had endured. He began documenting everything: the photos, the receipts, the messages from the anonymous sender. He reached out to Lyle and a few other friends, sharing just enough of the story to ensure they'd take his side when the time came. Serena had built her lies on a fragile foundation, and Marcus was determined to watch it crumble. Marcus had been blind to her deceit for too long, and now that he saw the truth, he couldn't unsee it. The house felt like a battlefield. Marcus and Serena avoided each other, their conversations limited to tense exchanges or silence. The tension was suffocating, a storm waiting to break. Marcus's days were spent in the studio, pouring his emotions onto the canvas. He painted furiously, creating works that reflected the chaos in his heart, abstract swirls of reds and blacks, jagged strokes that seemed to cut into the canvas. Serena, meanwhile, was a ghost of herself. She barely left the house, her attempts to speak to Marcus rebuffed at every turn. Guilt and fear weighed heavily on her, but she was too afraid to confront him again. One afternoon, Marcus received an email from David Whitmore. The subject line read, "A proposal to consider." His breath caught as he opened it. The message was short and to the point. "Marcus, Serena mentioned your work to me, and I'm very impressed. I'd like to meet and discuss how I can help elevate your career. Let me know if you're interested. David." Marcus stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. The audacity of the man was staggering. After everything he had done, David was now reaching out to him as if nothing had happened. For a brief moment, Marcus considered responding, setting up a meeting just to confront him. But he decided against it. He didn't want to give David the satisfaction of seeing him unravel. Instead, he forwarded the email to Serena with a single line, "Explain this." When Serena came home that evening, she looked pale and exhausted. She held her phone in her hand, the email open. "Marcus, I didn't know he was going to contact you," she said immediately. "Didn't you?" Marcus replied, his tone icy. "He's just trying to help," she said, her voice trembling. "I told you, Marcus, this was all for you." "Stop lying," Marcus shouted, slamming his fist on the table. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know what's been going on between you two? Serena flinched, but didn't deny it. Marcus's chest heaved as he struggled to contain his rage. You betrayed me, Serena. You sold our marriage for some empty promises from a man who doesn't give a damn about either of us. Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake, she said. I was desperate, Marcus. I just wanted to help you, to give you the life you deserve. And this is how you do it, he snapped. By sneaking around, lying to me, humiliating me? Serena collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus watched her, his heart a mix of anger and anguish. He had loved her once, but now all he felt was betrayal. The next day, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't let Serena's actions define his life any longer. He began putting his plan into motion, one step at a time. The first step was reaching out to the gallery director. Despite his earlier cancellation, he explained that he had reconsidered and wanted to proceed with the exhibition. We're tight on time, Marcus, the director said. Are you sure you're ready? I'll be ready, Marcus replied, his voice steady. But this time, the exhibition wasn't just about showcasing his art. It was about exposing the truth. Marcus spent the next few days finishing his new paintings. Each piece was a reflection of his pain, his anger, his betrayal. He painted Serena's face distorted by guilt, David's smirk twisted into something monstrous, and his own image as a shadow, broken and forgotten. The pieces were raw and unfiltered, a stark contrast to his earlier work. When he delivered them to the gallery, the director was stunned. These are powerful, she said, studying the pieces. Very different from your usual style. They're honest, Marcus said simply. On the night of the exhibition, the gallery was packed. Art critics, collectors, and enthusiasts mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the pieces. Marcus stood in the corner, watching as people reacted to his work. He saw the confusion, the shock, the discomfort on their faces. He saw Serena's betrayal laid bare, her image frozen on the canvas for all to see. And then Serena walked in. She looked around the gallery, her face pale as she realized what Marcus had done. The paintings told a story, their story, and there was no hiding from it. People whispered as they glanced at her, their eyes filled with judgment and pity. Serena approached Marcus, her voice trembling. Why would you do this? Why would I do this? Marcus repeated, his voice low. Because the world deserves to know who you really are. Tears filled her eyes, but Marcus felt no sympathy. You destroyed our marriage, he said. Now you can watch as your lies unravel. The fallout from the exhibition rippled through both Marcus and Serena's lives like a stone thrown into still water. The raw honesty of Marcus's paintings drew critical acclaim, with several art critics praising his fearless exploration of personal betrayal and emotional pain. But the success came with a price. Serena's image was etched into Marcus's work, unmistakably hers despite the abstract elements. Those who knew her whispered behind her back, the once friendly faces in their social circle now distant and cold. Friends who had defended her in the past stopped answering her calls, their silence a reflection of the judgment that surrounded her. She confronted Marcus a week after the exhibition, her voice trembling with anger and desperation. You've humiliated me, she said, her fists clenched. You've turned me into a public spectacle. Marcus, who had been packing up his studio, barely glanced at her. You humiliated yourself, Serena. I just painted the truth. This isn't justice, it's revenge, she snapped. And you deserve it, Marcus said coldly. Serena's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus refused to waver. For months, he had been the one drowning in pain, the one carrying the weight of her betrayal. Now, she was feeling the consequences of her actions, and he wouldn't shield her from them. As the days turned into weeks, Serena's life spiraled further. The whispers followed her everywhere, from her workplace to her family gatherings. David, the man she had risked everything for, had vanished entirely. His promises of sponsorship and connections had been nothing more than empty words. Even Serena's family grew distant. Her sister, who had been her confidant, now barely spoke to her. You made your bed, Serena, she had said during one of their last conversations. Now you have to lie in it. Serena began to withdraw, isolating herself in the small apartment she had moved into after Marcus forced her out of their home. She spent her days staring at the walls, haunted by the faces in Marcus's paintings. Meanwhile, Marcus was riding the wave of his newfound success. The exhibition had sold out, and he received offers for commissions and gallery collaborations. For the first time in years, he felt financially stable, his work finally recognized by the art world. But the success felt hollow. As much as he tried to move forward, Marcus couldn't escape the shadows of his past. He had achieved his goal of exposing Serena and reclaiming his life, but the victory brought little satisfaction. His paintings, while celebrated, were constant reminders of the pain he had endured. Marcus began to withdraw from the art scene, declining invitations to events and interviews. He spent more time alone, walking through the city or sitting in his studio, staring at blank canvases. One night, Marcus received a call from Lyle. "Hey man," Lyle said cautiously. "I heard about Serena. What about her?" Marcus asked, his tone guarded. "She's not doing so well," Lyle said. "I ran into her downtown. She looked rough." Marcus felt a pang of guilt, but he quickly pushed it aside. "That's not my problem anymore." "I get it," Lyle said, "but maybe you should talk to her. Just once." "There's nothing left to say," Marcus replied, ending the call. But the thought lingered. As much as Marcus tried to convince himself that Serena's downfall was justified, he couldn't entirely shake the guilt. He had loved her once, and a small part of him still cared, despite everything. The next day, Marcus decided to visit her apartment. He stood outside the door for several minutes, debating whether to knock. Finally, he took a deep breath and rapped on the door. When Serena opened it, she looked like a shadow of herself. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes hollow, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flat. "I wanted to see how you're doing," Marcus said, though the words felt empty. She laughed bitterly. "Why? So you can see the damage you've done?" Marcus frowned. "You did this to yourself, Serena." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I ruined everything. I don't need you to remind me." For a moment, Marcus considered walking away, but something in her eyes stopped him. Despite everything, he saw the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who had once believed in him when no one else did. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. I don't know." Serena nodded, wiping her eyes. "I don't blame you for hating me, Marcus. I hate myself." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. That night, Marcus left Serena's apartment feeling more conflicted than ever. He had sought closure, but all he found was emptiness. Serena, too, was left in the ruins of her choices, haunted by regret and the life she had thrown away. Both of them had lost something they could never regain. The weeks following Marcus's visit to Serena's apartment passed in a haze. Neither of them spoke again, each trapped in their own spiral of regret and pain. The connection they had once shared, filled with dreams of a future together, had been replaced by an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal and bitterness. Marcus's artistic success continued to grow, yet he found little solace in it. The acclaim, the invitations to new exhibitions, and the steady stream of commissions felt hollow. His new pieces were celebrated as masterpieces of raw emotion, but to Marcus, they were monuments to his broken life. Every painting reminded him of the betrayal, the love that had crumbled, and the parts of himself he'd lost along the way. He had won the battle for his career, but the cost had been far greater than he'd anticipated. Marcus rarely returned to the house they had once shared. He sold it, using the money to move into a smaller, quieter space near the edge of the city. It was functional, but devoid of warmth, a reflection of his own state of mind. For Serena, life continued to spiral downward. Her job, once a stable lifeline, became unbearable as whispers of her affair spread among her colleagues. Her boss, once sympathetic to her struggles, began to distance himself, subtly pushing her toward the margins of the company. Eventually, Serena was let go, the official reason cited as downsizing. But she knew the truth. Her reputation had made her a liability. Now jobless and estranged from her family and friends, Serena sank deeper into isolation. She spent her days in the small, dingy apartment, replaying the choices that had led her there. The memories were relentless. She thought of Marcus's love, his unwavering belief in his art, and the way he had trusted her implicitly. She thought of the first lie she told him, the first dinner with David, and how she had justified every betrayal by convincing herself it was for their future. Now, that future was gone, replaced by a cold, unyielding reality. One evening, Marcus received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was one of his earlier paintings, a small piece he had sold years ago. The accompanying note wasn't signed, but the handwriting was familiar. "I've always believed in your talent. I'm sorry I let you down." Marcus stared at the painting for a long time, his emotions a mix of sorrow and anger. He wanted to tear the note apart, to throw the painting away, but something stopped him. Instead, he placed the painting on the wall of his studio, a reminder of the woman Serena had once been. Despite their separation, Marcus and Serena's lives remained intertwined by the echoes of their shared past. They were like two halves of a shattered mirror, each reflecting the other's pain in distorted fragments. One rainy evening, Marcus found himself walking through the city, the streets slick with water reflecting the glow of streetlights. He passed by the gallery where his infamous exhibition had been held and paused. The building was closed, its windows dark, but the memories came flooding back. Months turned into years, and Marcus and Serena continued to live separate lives. Marcus's art became darker, more introspective, as he delved deeper into themes of loss and redemption. Critics hailed him as a genius, but those who knew him saw a man haunted by his past. Serena, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. She moved to a smaller town, taking on a string of low-paying jobs just to get by. She avoided relationships, too ashamed of her past to let anyone get close. Both of them carried the weight of their choices, their lives forever marked by the betrayal that had shattered their marriage. Thank you for listening to the story to the end. Please like, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel.